Everybody, this is Dream, and this is going to be the breakdown for Tuesday's games that start at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have a pretty big slate here, quite a few games, lots of pitching, a lot of good pitchers pitching actually, and then we have several teams that are stackable. The stackable teams today are Toronto, Boston, Baltimore, Houston, and Atlanta. I think those are the best options. You could also take a look at the Yankees and some other small looks at St. Louis and Washington. But overall, I think those are the best teams to take a look at for stacking purposes. With that said, let's go and get into the pitchers that I do like here today. Lance McCullers is probably the top option and the most expensive option. He's only pitched in a handful of games so far this season, which is that means 7 games. And in 4 of those, in the last 4, he's been over 38 fantasy points, and he only had 2 games before that were below 30, which were 24 and 21 against Atlanta and Baltimore. But he's had some good games overall this season. Not particularly against great teams, but he can get another 30 to 35 point game here in this matchup against Arizona. This game's also at home, so that's a little bit more beneficial than being at Arizona as well. Then we're going to take a look at Robbie Ray, who's going up against Texas. Obviously, Texas not the best team to have to go up against, but he's been good against them this season with 34 and 57 fantasy points in those games. The only real issue he's had is in the last four games, he's not been particularly that great. He's had 15, 21, and 37 in the last couple. So, unfortunately, he's been good, but he's had just a couple off games here and there. But I still think he's a really good option on this particular slate, simply because he does have that high potential here on this particular game. The only real drawback here is Seattle's just not hitting the ball that well lately. Then we're going to look at Zach Wheeler for Philadelphia. He is, in the last 3 games, he's been a little bit below average, but before that, he's only had 1 bad game in 3 months. As you can see, he's had 21, 22, and 15 the last 3. But before that, he's just stringing lots of really good games, with one exception there. But he's got a really solid matchup here against Chicago Cubs in Chicago, and so this is a nice plus matchup for him. I think that any of McCullers, Ray, or Wheeler are all really solid picks on this particular slate. So then I have one more guy to talk to. He's more of a secondary option, though, if you want to save money, is Carrasco for the Mets against Miami. Miami hasn't been very good lately, and he's also hit 41, 26, 54, and 43 against Miami this season. But he's been a little bit more inconsistent through all the other games, which the top 3 guys I mentioned haven't really been. So he's a decent option here, but he has had some more downside than some of the other guys here. He has been good against Miami, though, but again, he's just not as good lately. Anyway, that's the pitchers I think you gotta take a look at. I do think you need to pay up for pitcher today, simply because, all 4 of those guys I mentioned are going to be pretty popular usages, and so you probably don't want to skate away too far from them. And there's plenty of value on the slate, so it's not like you really have to risk it. Even if you use McCullers, you only need $3,025 per player, and there's, especially in the outfielders and some of the other positions, you can find some sub 3,000 guys very easily. So with that said, let's go and get into the players I do like today. Vlad Guerrero Jr. obviously is pretty expensive, but he's probably one of my favorite options on this particular slate. He's been hitting the ball pretty well lately. He's getting hits in most games and stuff. He is kind of due for a home run, but he's been really solid against Talion in his career. I think I have the stat here. He's had, where does it go? He's had, Vlad Jr. Sorry, he's hit 300 and over 10 at-bats against Talion in his career. Then we're going to look at Matt Olson for Atlanta. He's finally getting out of his slump. Had a really nice day yesterday with a home run, and he even got a couple. He also got some extra RBIs as well throughout the game. So I think he's back, and he's pretty inexpensive too for his based on his fact he was in a slump. Anthony Rizzo looks really solid in this matchup today against Toronto. He's also in a great spot, and he's also been really good against his opponent throughout his career. Rutschman for Baltimore is another good option who's been good in his career against the pitcher. he's been hitting the ball pretty well lately. He's kind of been boomer bust lately, but I still think he's in a great spot here for Baltimore. And then Ryan Mountcastle. If you're gonna go with a Baltimore stack, then you definitely want to get Mountcastle and Rutschman in here. He's just been hitting the ball pretty solidly as of late, even though he went through a little bit of a slump early on. He's back to hitting the ball pretty well. Then we're going to go look at second base, where we have Jose Altuve. Obviously, pretty expensive on this particular slate, but he's been hitting the ball pretty well lately. A little bit boomer bust, but he's getting hits in just about every game, and that's what we like to see. Pretty safe option. Marcus Semien has a little bit of a tougher matchup today against Ravi Ray, but I still think he's been hitting the ball so well that he's somebody you have to consider at this position. Tommy Edman for St. Louis is just too cheap for his potential production in this particular matchup. Even though he hasn't been that good lately, he's had some really good games, and so it's just a matter of getting the right matchups for him. Whit Merrifield is in a great spot for Toronto against the Yankees. He's been really good against Talion as well, and his price point is way too low for his potential production in this matchup. Colton Wong is a guy I really like here for Milwaukee against St. Louis, and he's been extremely good as of late. He's had some pretty massive games. He's getting hits in most games, but he's still a little bit boomer bust. Then Gabby Torres has been absolutely sensational as the Yankees have been doing well, and he really hadn't had too many bad games as of late, and so I think he's a really safe option, and he's also not too expensive. And then Jeff McNeil for the Mets, he's been really good lately, and I think he's in a really nice plus matchup here. He's been great against Pablo Lopez in his career. Lopez has been traditionally really bad against the Mets this season especially. Then we're going to look at third base, so we have Rafael Devers. I don't know why I said Robert. Anyhow, he's been extremely good lately, and he's, got home run potential every time he comes up to bat here, and this is a nice big old plus matchup for him. He's also been really good against him in his career. Alex Bregman's another guy I like here. He hasn't been quite as good lately, but he has had a couple good games in a row. He's kind of boomer bust, but his price has come down some. Austin Riley has been really solid after going through a little bit of a slump, and he's just getting hits most games, and he has home run potential in this particular matchup. Yoan Moncada has been extremely good lately, and I think he's one of my favorite options on this particular slate. The White Sox have been a little bit disappointing lately, but I still think he's in a great spot here. Sorry about the computer. He's just been hitting the ball pretty well, a lot better than his average as of late, and so he's somebody I like in this particular matchup. Plus, he's really inexpensive. Matt Chapman's another guy that I think is in a good spot here. He's been hitting the ball really well, and he has a good history against Talions, so I think he's even though he's a boomer bust option, he's somebody you got to take a look at. And then finally, Justin Turner for the Dodgers. He's been a little bit slumpy as of late, but he's been having some really big games before that, and so it's just a matter of the right circumstance for him, and he's in a good spot here. At shortstop, we have, Xander Bogaerts, who hasn't been all that great lately, but it just takes one game, and he's been at least getting hits in most games and scoring some fantasy points, but we do need to have him a bigger game, and this is a perfect opportunity for him. Then we have Bo Bichette, who has had a fantastic career against Talion in his career, and he's been hitting the ball pretty well lately. Not quite as boom as bust as he had been before this slate of games, so I do think he's in a great spot. Francisco Lindor, I think he's one of the best picked players against Pablo Lopez, period, and he's had some absolutely massive games lately, but he is a little bit boomer bust. Willy Adames has been extremely good lately, averaging almost 18 fantasy points a game here on FanDuel, and he does have a couple of bad games, but he's still been hitting the ball extremely well, and is a nice plus matchup for him as well. Gunnar Henderson has been kind of hit and miss lately, but he hit a home run yesterday, and he seems like he's seeing the ball pretty well, and I think he's a pretty good spot against subpar pitching. And then Jeremy Pena, now if he plays, then he's going to be somebody we're going to take a look at. He's been hitting the ball really well after he finally got out of his slump, and his price is still pretty solid. And then in the outfielder situation, we have Shohei Ohtani. He's probably overall favorite for this particular slate. I think he's got home run potential in this game against Oakland, and his price is obviously pretty high, but he's one of the actual cheaper stars that you could pay up for. Yordan Alvarez, obviously averaging almost 17 fantasy points a game, but he's had a couple off games lately. He's still a really good option on this particular slate against Arizona. Mike Trout, I mean, he's got a really good matchup here against Oakland, and he's had some really massive games lately, but he's only had one home run in the last 10, so I think he's due for another one. And then Kyle Tucker, there he is. Sorry about that. He's averaging over 10 fantasy points a game, and he's had some really solid games lately. He's a little bit boomer bust, though, but he's in a good matchup. Ronald Acuna, he didn't have a good game yesterday after coming back from injury, but he's got another really nice plus matchup here today, and so I think he's in a good spot to potentially hit a home run. Cedric Mullins is probably one of the cheapest options that are just a home run threat every time he comes up to bat, and I really like him in this particular matchup. Plus, he's been hitting the ball extremely well as of late, and his price hasn't come up yet, so he's one of my safest, really good options on this particular slate. George Springer is another guy I really like for Toronto. He's been having some really massive games as of late, though he does mix in a couple bad games here and there. He's still in a pretty good spot here against the Yankees. Kyle Schwarber, he looks really good today against Chicago, who has not been very good as of late, and Stroman doesn't really project that well in this particular game. And Schwarber's had some really massive games lately, but he is boomer bust. Ward is another guy I like here for the Angels. He seems his price is still a little bit too low for his production lately, and I think he's in a nice plus matchup here. You could even make an Angels outfield stack if you really wanted to. And then Tommy Pham for the Boston. He hasn't been hitting the ball quite as well as we'd like. He's been boom or bust, but this is a situation where he could boom, and his price is pretty inexpensive. And then Toscar, Hernandez for Toronto, and a really great matchup against Talion. He's been having a lot of really good games lately, and his price is really cheap for his production as of late. Brandon Nimmo is in a great spot here for the Mets. He's also been hitting the ball extremely well, and his price is too cheap for his production. And then Alex Verdugo, who hasn't really hit the ball as great as we'd normally like him to. He's been hitting the ball really good the last 5 or 6 games. I think he's on a 6-game hitting streak, and if he can score, a couple RBIs and stuff in those games, he'll start scoring some decent amount of fantasy points. And then JD Martinez finally, sorry about that, for Boston. He hadn't been hitting the ball quite as good either. He's very boomer bust, but he's been hitting some home runs lately, and so I think he's in a good spot as well against Baltimore. Overall, this slate is really solid. We have a lot of good options at each position. There's no position where I felt like that there wasn't value at, and there's no position where I felt like it was hard to find good options at all. Overall, it's a really solid slate. Obviously, there's lots of games, so we've got plenty of teams to choose people from. But I do think you got to pay up for pitching on this slate. There's too many good pitchers available at the top of the price ranges of pitchers, and there's really not a ton in the middle here that is really going to make you feel good about the, paying down for somebody. But like I said, there's so much value on the slate that's going to be good for FanDuel that you're going to be able to kind of mix and match players all you want. I would definitely start with Cedric Mullins, just being so cheap with his production lately, and then take a look at, you could mix in a more expensive guy like Bo Bichette or Austin Riley, and then, Whit Merrifield and stuff. You could just really mix and match a lot of different guys in order to make your lineup well. I think Vlad Jr. is also somebody you got to try to fit in there somehow. And of course, you could always try to stick Aaron Judge in here. He really hasn't been all that good lately since he got to 60 home runs, so I don't know if it's just the pressure of trying to hit 61 is messing him up a little bit. But he does have a good matchup here against Barrios, so hopefully he can hit it tomorrow. But I don't really think he's a top-tier option on this particular slate. So with that said, thank you guys again for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.